Destiny Recall by Chaz Quatrini. Prologue. Sullied snowdrifts, remnants of an extended lower Michigan winter, painted the shoulders of the interminable I-94 as a Japanese compact darted amidst rush-hour traffic. In defense of a blinding late-afternoon sun, Mickey Gallo groped for his designer shades, and in the process strayed into an adjacent lane, affecting the discord of yet another fellow commuter. Gallo's reputation as a motor vehicle operator was biblical. To his white-knuckled passengers, he had long been compared to the Old Testament's Jehu behind the wheel. Despite his shortcomings in courtesy and safety, he had managed to steer clear of any transitory cataclysms. Gallo's rental car struggled up the steep exit ramp, feeding into his boyhood home of Warren, Michigan, a modest middle-class suburb of Detroit. He mentally kicked himself for not securing a better vehicle. A Viper or a Lexus would have been nice, he thought, but he was quickly reminded why he chose the nondescript transportation. Not lost was the irony of the time displayed on his digital clock. 4:04, matching the date, April 4th, 2007, his 43rd birthday. He was always intrigued by numbers and dates, but Mickey Gallo's mood was far from bemused as he contemplated the next few hours of his life, for as he figured, they would be his last. Chapter 1. Mickey Charles Gallo was born to Patricia and Charles Gallo on his father's 19th birthday. Charlie named his son after his boyhood idol, the baseball legend Mickey Mantle of the New York Yankees. Young Mickey was preordained by his father to follow in his namesake's footsteps, but hopefully not all of them. It has been written ad nauseum that if Mantle had only taken better care of himself, he would have set unobtainable baseball records. As it was, Mantle took full advantage of the booze, the broads, and every other profligacy laid at his feet, and yet he still managed to limp his way into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Charlie Gallo, in his youth, was a standout sandlot legend himself, who went on to set numerous high school records. He was touted as a can't-miss prospect, destined for the big leagues, until fate intervened. Charlie and Patricia Ann Canary were high school sweethearts. They were both extremely popular. Charlie was the handsome, standout athlete, and Patty was a cute, blue-eyed blonde with a 4.0 grade average who played piano and led the school choir as a junior. But soon after Charlie's graduation and before her senior year, Pat became pregnant. At age 17, Pat would drop out of school, ending her plans to be the only one of 5 Canary siblings to go to college. Charlie Gallo would step up to the plate, but only in the metaphorical sense. When the Major League Scouts, who were clamoring around him, got wind of the impending child, they ran for the hills. Even though Charlie did the right thing and proposed to Pat, both of their families disapproved. "You're too young," and "adoption is best," were the collective responses. The young couple would remain resolute. They would marry and raise the child, although they had no idea how. Their families would offer little support, almost to the point of disowning them. Fred Gallo, Charlie's father, was furious. As the third-generation frustrated ball player in his own youth, he saw his grandson making it to the big leagues as redemption for his own son not making it, and for himself not making it. It seemed the entire Gallo clan was banking on the youngster's future success. Charlie's Uncle George was part owner of a used car lot and gave Charlie an almost new Ford convertible for his 18th birthday, perhaps looking for future returns. Ironically, it was a steamy July night in the back seat of that convertible that changed everything. Charlie was not just being responsible or noble. He loved Pat, and she loved him. Her parents were straight-laced Southern Baptists, transplanted after the war, and though they reluctantly consented to the marriage, they vowed to let the young couple fend for themselves. Pat and Charlie would find the justice of the peace and marry several months before the baby was due. They stayed at Charlie's parents' home while Charlie worked several odd jobs, trying to save enough money to move into a cheap apartment. Charlie had always been the envy of Pershing High School in Detroit, where he was the original Fonz before the Happy Days TV show. He was adored by students and faculty alike. His teachers would often cut him slack on grades as well as attendance. Now desperate for work, he would end up returning in shame to land a job at his high school as a part-time groundskeeper. He would cut the grass, trim the trees and weeds, all while being taunted by onlooking students as they passed. "Look at the hero now," they scoffed. "Hey, Johnny Appleseed, not quite the big leagues, eh?" "Ha ha ha!" But Charlie bit his lip and did what he had to do. Making matters worse, he had to walk to work after Uncle George confiscated the car, and his parents were counting the days until the couple would move out of their cramped home. Eventually, the young couple would be accepted into a low-income housing development just in time for the birth of their son. The projects, as it was known, consisted of a succession of tenement buildings occupied by people in similar situations. Charlie found a better-paying job at an appliance store, but barely earned enough to feed his family. Despite many a hungry night, the couple made it through thanks to sympathetic neighbors who dropped off care packages of milk and diapers. Pat's older sisters also lent a much-needed helping hand after catching a glimpse of the undernourished mother and child. As the months passed, the young couple turned the corner. Charlie would be hired at a Chrysler factory on the assembly line, and by the time they were expecting their second child, they had saved enough money to buy a modest 3-bedroom home in nearby Warren, Michigan. Their new baby girl, Callie Storm, was the apple of Charlie's eye. Pat had named her after some mythical Greek goddess. Charlie chose the middle name Storm because of the torrential weather at the time of the delivery. But Charlie would always call her his little birdie, for just after she was delivered, instead of crying, she made the softest chirping sounds. "Hey there, little birdie," he said, holding her for the very first time. Chapter 2. Mickey Charles Gallo, a name chosen not by accident or coincidence, was groomed by his father to play baseball. Little Mickey would spend endless hours after school with Charlie, pitching tennis balls and running through various drills. Nowadays, there is much ado in the annals of child psychology regarding parents who attempt to live vicariously through their offspring. Charlie Gallo would likely say, "Tell the shrink to send me the bill when my boy makes it to the big leagues." To his credit, Mickey took to the game and excelled under his father's tutelage. Charlie was never overbearing or demanding. He simply loved his son and loved the game, figuring it was the only legacy he could leave his boy. In a world of absent and neglectful fathers, Mickey was proud to have one like Charlie. In fact, like most young sons, he adored his dad. Young Mickey spent many hours poring over old newspaper clippings and box scores from a scrapbook his grandmother kept of Charlie's playing days. This only fueled an insatiable appetite for the game and a desire to make Charlie proud. By the time Mickey was 12 years old, he stood barely 5'1" and weighed 115 pounds. Yet he was hitting baseballs astonishing distances, swinging a 33-inch, 29-ounce aluminum bat. Mickey was wreaking havoc on competitors his own age, prompting the Little League to set restrictions on bat size. Soon, he was playing against boys 2 and 3 years older than himself. Thanks to the exercise regimen Charlie gave him to build his arm and leg strength, Mickey could run like the wind and throw a ball faster and harder than anyone during his school years. By the time he reached high school, Mickey Gallo was excelling in all sports, but in baseball, he was destined for greatness. Despite being only a 9th grader, Mickey had attracted the attention of Casino High School varsity coaches, who were willing to place him on the varsity team with juniors and seniors, bypassing the junior varsity team of 9th and 10th graders. Charlie Gallo, however, would have no part of this promotion. He figured it was better for his son to dominate against his peers, allowing his confidence to grow, rather than riding the bench or playing part-time with older boys. It was solid logic, and during spring practices, Mickey quickly became a leader as well as the team's best player. Then came the spring of 1979. Chapter 3. Tony and the Go-Kart. Tony Gray had been Mickey Gallo's best friend since the 2nd grade. They were an unlikely pair. Mickey, robust, extroverted, and adventurous, from a loving family. Tony, slight, almost sickly, raised by his mother, a bookworm who cloaked himself in academia. And despite his awkward and shy demeanor, he excelled in music. Their differences aside, the Dago and the Geek as they were jokingly called, formed a bond that would last a lifetime. Tony's long, stringy brown hair and glasses made him invisible to most girls, but that would change once his guitar skills came into play. While Tony had no interest in sports, Mickey desperately needed help with schoolwork. At first, tutoring seemed a small price to pay for Mickey's companionship. By 13, Tony was showing Mickey guitar licks. He had moved on from classical Spanish guitar lessons, traded his Martin 12-string for a Fender Stratocaster, and mapped out every lead on his Led Zeppelin albums, studying Jimmy Page note by note. Tony taught Mickey to read tabs, and with a knockoff Strat he gave him, Mickey practiced whenever he had a break from baseball, slowly developing fluency. Tony's 1955 Fender Stratocaster, exactly like the one the great Buddy Holly used, was a gift that mysteriously appeared under Tony's Christmas tree shortly after his 12th birthday. 6 years later, his mother Tina revealed the giver, Tony's father, Gary Gray, a man Tony had never known, who would eventually take his own life. Tony's life had been a tangle of secrets and heartbreak. His father's affair during Tina's pregnancy, the shocking revelation that the other woman was Tina's sister, and Gary's eventual death left deep scars. Yet, despite it all, Tony and Mickey's friendship endured. They even formed a modestly successful rock band, but in the early spring of 1979, they would create a memory that neither would ever forget. Tony had been tinkering with a 3.5 horsepower lawnmower engine he'd salvaged from a neighbor's trash. After gathering plywood, fan belts, and other parts, he built a crude go-kart. He removed the governor for maximum output, mounted wheels borrowed from an old wagon, and fashioned a makeshift steering system with cables from a 10-speed bike's handbrakes. The wooden crate sat precariously on a homemade frame, ready to roar. Tony's first test run on the smooth concrete of his street reached nearly 30 miles per hour. The handbrake held, the steering mostly obeyed. Now it was time to show Mickey. On a chilly, bright March morning, Tony stormed into the Gallo driveway, the engine sputtering. Mickey's sister Callie peered from the doorway, wary of the mechanical beast that seemed poised to invade their living room. "Let's ride, pal," Tony grinned. "Where the hell did you get this thing?" Mickey asked, wide-eyed. "I built it as a birthday present, but I couldn't wait till April." "Come on, try it out." Charlie Gallo shook his head, muttering, and retreated to the kitchen. Pat Gallo's apprehension was more audible. "That thing doesn't look safe," she said. "I tested it myself," Tony replied, brimming with confidence. "Where do you even plan to drive it? It's not legal," she warned. "Church parking lot, no cars, nothing to crash into," Mickey pleaded. "Fine, but be back in an hour for lunch." Tony smiled. "Follow me on your bike," he said. At the church, Tony explained the mechanics. The clutch engaged by lowering a spinning belt onto the rear pulley. Steering was intuitive, and the brake was a simple rubber block against the front wheel. Mickey climbed into the crate. His legs cramped, but he gripped the steering stick and engaged the clutch. At first, unsteady, he soon got the feel of the cart. "Yahoo! Watch out, Richard Petty!" he shouted, laughing. The cart hit top speed, but then veered sharply left. Mickey tried to correct, but the front left axle, carrying the brake, buckled under his weight. The cart lurched violently, heading straight for a light pole. "Tony!" Mickey screamed, leaning out of the crate as it disintegrated. He struck the pole head first. Blood poured from his forehead. Tony, horrified, ripped off his jacket and pressed it against the wound. Just then, entering into the lot was the church's pastor Mike Worley for his 11 o'clock service. Tony waved in obvious distress, prompting Worley to drive up to the scene and leap out. Tony cradled Mickey's head as the two of them lifted him into the van. "Stay with me, man." "I'm sorry." "I'm sorry." "Don't die," Tony whispered. "Nobody's gonna die," the pastor assured. The church van then raced to hospital a few minutes away. Attendants quickly assisted the unconscious boy when they arrived, and he was immediately brought to the emergency room. Mickey was in trouble. In. Outside, Tony sat on the curb, trembling. "I killed him. It's all my fault." After Pastor Worley contacted the Gallo family, he consoled the young boy. "He's in good hands." Within minutes, Charlie, Pat, and 11-year-old Callie arrived. Pat cried, "My baby! My baby!" Charlie held his daughter's hand, staring in disbelief. Callie sobbed at the sight of her mother's reaction. "Where's the doctor?" Charlie asked. "He hasn't come out yet," Pastor Worley said. They prayed together, beseeching God to spare Mickey's life. The doctor finally appeared. "I'm Dr. Michaels." Mickey sustained blunt force trauma to the frontal lobe. He lost significant blood and is in a coma. There's swelling, and the coma will help manage it. We can't make a prognosis yet. We'll know more in the coming hours. 3 days later, Mickey emerged from the coma. Charlie never left his bedside. Pat cared for Kaylee and snatched sleep when she could. Miraculously. Only a few days later, the kid made a full recovery and left the hospital with only a 4-inch scar on his forehead, a lifetime memento from his runaway go-kart adventure. Perhaps the happiest person of all was Tony. He had promised God that if Mickey survived, he would attend church every Sunday, and he kept that promise. By the opening of baseball season, Mickey received a clean bill of health, though Charlie and Pat continued to watch him carefully, ensuring nothing was rushed too soon. Chapter 4. April 4th, 1979, was to be a momentous day for the Gallo family. With the go-kart caper behind them, Pat had planned a birthday party for the boys. This was to follow Mickey's first high school baseball game, albeit a JV contest. Mom and Sis would attend, then scurry home to prepare the celebration. The junior varsity team would always play the first game of a doubleheader between the two schools. The JV game was scheduled to start at 3:30 p.m., and at the conclusion, the varsity teams would take the field. After many years of working on cars in his spare time, Charlie would open his very own facility, which specialized in the restoration of classic cars. On this day, he was working on his latest project, a 1971 Dodge Charger RT. He had painstakingly restored all the steel panels ravaged by time and was now into the painting phase. This car was to be the most lucrative commission to date. Charlie glanced at the clock, which was approaching 3:00 p.m. It was later than he had realized. The field was only about 5 miles away, but he still had to get the Charger in the booth to bake overnight. By the time he closed the shop, it was 3:15 p.m. He certainly didn't want to miss the first pitch of his son's very first high school game, so he quickly shed his overalls and raced out to his trusty 1970 Plymouth Duster. The rush hour traffic was already in full force as Charlie anxiously waited to make a left turn out of the parking lot to enter the 6-lane Grosbeck Highway. Charlie gunned his 6-cylinder across the first 3 lanes, making a sharp turn in front of a UPS truck, aiming for the second lane, which he thought was open. He thought wrong, for in what truckers call the rocking chair was a speeding full-sized Buick hidden by the large truck. What happened next was a pseudo-pit maneuver. The Buick collided with Charlie's right rear bumper and sent him spinning back in front of the UPS truck and on toward oncoming traffic, colliding head-on with a similar-sized vehicle. The sickening sound of crunching metal and exploding glass left little doubt. Despite the quick arrival of EMS, 34-year-old Charlie Gallo was dead, probably after the initial impact. Even more tragic, it was evident he was not the only fatality. When Charlie's car crossed over into the oncoming traffic, he collided with a car driven by a 62-year-old woman who had just picked up her 8-year-old granddaughter from school. Grandma was killed instantly. The little girl died before reaching the hospital. It was stated that no one was wearing seatbelts. It probably wouldn't have mattered. Mickey knew his dad might be a late arrival, but he was disappointed by his tardiness as the game was about to begin. He settled for a good luck kiss from Mom and trotted out to center field. The South Lake team went down quickly in the top of the first inning. "Where is Dad?" Mick shouted as he trotted in. "He'll be here, Mick. Probably traffic," she assured. Mickey was to bat fourth, or clean up, a spot usually reserved for the premier hitter on the team, which he certainly was. Mick had secretly hoped his team would go out 1-2-3 in the bottom of the first inning, thus postponing his turn at bat until the second inning and giving his dad more time to arrive. But alas, 2 out of the first 3 hitters reached base. So Mickey Gallo walked up to the plate with 2 on and 1 out. He took one last gaze out to the parking lot, but there was no activity. Mickey took a deep breath, then let out a somber sigh as he kicked the dirt with his spikes. On the mound for Southlake was a highly touted youngster named Richie Green, who would eventually sign a major league contract with the New York Mets, then fizzle out in the minor leagues. Green had been uncharacteristically wild in the first inning, and though he was well aware of Mickey's hitting prowess, he tried to guide his first pitch over the middle of the plate just to get a quick strike. Nerves or no nerves, dad or no dad, thousands of batting practice pitches from Charlie triggered an intrinsic and immediate appreciation for what's known as a meatball. Mickey swung and unleashed a powerful yet graceful swing akin to the great Ted Williams, and caught that fastball square on the screws, sending it high over the right field fence, bounding onto Hoover Avenue. To the spectators' distress, a couple of young boys scurried through traffic to retrieve the ball, which somehow made it safely to the other side of the street. The euphoria of the moment was dampened by the thought of his father's absence. He wanted this to be a mutual celebration. Mom and Callie hysterically cheered as he rounded the bases and touched home plate. Mickey instinctively started to point at the stands, but he just sort of hung his head, even with his teammates shouting and slapping him on the back. He could only manage an obligatory smile. By the fourth inning, the Gallo family knew something was amiss. Maybe his car had trouble, Kaylee offered. Pat added, he did say he was working on a special project. The rest of the game was anticlimactic as Mickey and the casino team rolled to a 9-2 victory. When the game was over, one of the two boys that had retrieved Mickey's home run ball handed it to him and said, "Awesome hit." He thanked the boys who perhaps were looking for a reward that never came. Now it was on home and the reason for Dad's absence. That reason would change his life forever. Chapter 5. Services for Charlie were held 4 days later. It was an open casket, thanks to the funeral home's skilled makeup artist who worked wonders on Charlie's mangled face. When it came time for Mickey to say goodbye, there wasn't a dry eye among the mourners. The grieving son stood over the casket, baseball in hand, the home run ball from the game his father never got to see. There was an inscription, "To Dad, from your loving son." Mickey placed it gently beside his father and whispered, "This one's for you." With that, he turned and walked out of the funeral home without looking back. Pat Gallo was nearly catatonic. Her sister Geraldine moved into the house for over a month while the family drifted through their grief like zombies. Mickey never returned to his baseball team. In fact, he never returned to school for the final 8 weeks. That night of the accident, friends and relatives crowded the small home, trying and failing to console Pat and the children. Then came the second blow, the knockout punch that would haunt Mickey forever. The little girl killed in the crash, along with her grandmother, was Lisa Bishop, freckle-faced and 8 years old, the little sister of Mickey's teammate on the Cusino baseball team, third baseman Jerry Bishop. Lisa and her grandmother were on their way to the game. Jerry and his family naturally blamed Mickey's dad for the tragedy. He had been speeding, careless. Pat Gallo never shook the feeling that their obsession with baseball had played a part. Callie, sweet and forgiving, never blamed anyone, though she could have. She could have resented the way baseball monopolized Charlie's attention. But that wasn't who she was. Mickey was destroyed. He couldn't face Jerry, couldn't face the guilt. Baseball, once a bond with his father, now felt like a curse. It only reminded him of pain, loss, and what might have been. Charlie's dream that his son would be the second coming of Mickey Mantle died on Grosbeck Highway that April afternoon. Oh, what might have been. He gave up the game for good. A year later, Mickey dropped out of school entirely. On his 18th birthday, he left home and moved in with his friend Tony Gray. It was about this time that the Detroit Tigers announced they were holding a tryout camp at a local high school. Mickey paid no mind to this announcement, but after the incessant urging of his friends and family, he relented. Grabbing his old bat and glove, he showed up and joined dozens of other dream chasers on the field. But after taking some hacks in the batting cage and shagging some fly balls in the outfield, it was blatantly obvious that the magic was gone and the game had passed him by. He was now competing with grown men, and his heart wasn't in it anyway. But Mickey felt he had to give it a try for his dad. "Sorry, Pop," he malaised as he packed up and left. Chapter 6. April 4th, 2007, 4:30 p.m. As he pulled up to a stoplight at the end of the exit ramp, Mickey glanced at the reflection in his rearview mirror. 2 sleepless nights in a row exaggerated the already permanent dark circles under his eyes. Beyond the speckles of gray in his brown hair, he was well kept at 43 years old. He had his mother to thank for his full head of hair. The hillbilly side of the family, as he would often say, had hair like straw, and they never seemed to die. In fact, his grandfather on his mom's side was still kicking at 92. His father was already balding in his mid-30s, as it seemed all the Dagos died before the age of 65. Mickey Gallo did, however, possess his dad's good looks, his Italian olive-shaded complexion, which complemented his athletic body, and easily found favor with the ladies. He was often described as a cross between Al Pacino and Elvis. Though Mickey quit baseball after his dad died, he would spend endless hours in the gym and on tennis courts. He had only given up jogging a couple of years earlier due to a chronic knee issue. Mickey always regretted marrying too early and not enjoying the fruits of his youth. After playing guitar with Tony for a number of years, he discovered he had a not unpleasant singing voice, and soon the boys would form a band. They would spend much of their 20s and early 30s playing and singing in rock and roll bars, making some extra money to pay the bills. It was in one of those rundown juke joints called the Windmill Tavern that he met Cassie Green, who was a 20-year-old dishwater blonde with a waifish build and a smile with 1,000 teeth. She had big blue eyes that sparkled even in the dim light of a smoke-filled room. He noticed her one night during a band break and sauntered over, ready to rattle off the usual litany of pickup lines. But Cassie beat him to the draw. "I don't have much time because I have a sitter at home, so I was wondering if you'd like to stop by when you're done tonight." "Wow," Mickey thought that was easy. "When do I find out your name?" he smirked. "It's Cassie," she answered. "Is there anything else you'd like to know? Here's my number. Just give me a buzz when you're done, and I'll give you directions. It's not that far from here." "Well, it might be late," he toyed. "We break down the gear on Saturday nights, and we have to wait to get paid." Mickey knew all along he wasn't going to pass this up. Just then, Cassie's girlfriend returned from the restroom, and boom! He may have just sold out a bit too quickly. Strolling up for an introduction was a top-heavy bleach blonde with Edward Scissorhand nails and a half-hour too much makeup. "This is my friend Robin," Cassie offered. "She works with me." Mickey silently wondered if this was a package deal. In any case, he had no other offers this night. So as he greeted Robin and pocketed Cassie's number, he thanked them for coming out. He then returned to the stage for a final set of Rolling Stones and Bob Seger cover tunes. As it turned out, it did take longer than usual to get out of the Windmill Tavern. It was 2:30 a.m. before Mickey called the number she had given him. When the answering machine picked up, he left a short message saying he was sorry it took so long to get out and left his phone number. It didn't take much thought that where there is a babysitter, there must be a baby, so he half regretted leaving his phone number. It was only 8 hours later that the phone in his apartment was ringing. "Who the hell is calling this early?" he bellowed. In the room across the hall, his roommate Tony also voiced his displeasure, but Tony would coyly use this as an excuse to rid him of the previous night's plunder. A ruby-haired groupie named, well, he wasn't sure she had a name. "Oh well, sweetie, I gotta get my ass up and get out of here and get to my little sister's birthday party," he reasoned. Mickey was always amused at the parting stories Tony would offer his prey. In any case, the answering machine picked up the call. It was Cassie. "It's phone tag and you're it," she announced, then hung up. Mickey did not return the call, but Cassie showed up at the Windmill Tavern alone the following week, and at the end of the night, Mickey followed her to her apartment, and after dismissing the sitter, they made love. There weren't any exploding rockets, just a mutual gratification of each other's sexual manifesto. Cassie told him he couldn't stay the night because she didn't want to do any explaining to her 2-year-old daughter, Nicole. That was fine with him, so he quickly got dressed, and then, after mumbling some incoherent words about calling her next week, she retorted, "Don't worry, I'll call you when I need your services." Mickey smiled, gave her a hug, and escaped, sine die, into the pre-dawn light. Wow, he thought to himself, a no-strings-attached getaway. A girl he could just hit and run and not worry about pretending to be considerate and sensitive. In any case, he figured he probably wouldn't see her again. She wasn't all that great in the sack. Of course, he didn't give her his A-game either. And her body, although trimmed, did show the ravages of childbirth. Her modest B-cup breasts were somewhat deflated, and there was a telltale C-section scar, one ominous enough to appear emergency in nature. But Mickey would see Cassie again, and again, and again. And so began a relationship of volatility and vengeance, which would ensue for 13 years. Now, after 2 marriages, divorce, 2 children, several domestic altercations, and dozens of court appearances, Mickey Gallo vowed to end this bitter war tonight, birthday or no birthday. Mickey pulled into his old neighborhood and parked his rental in front of his boyhood home. The modest 3-bedroom ranch harbored many memories, both good and bad, since 1967. Pat Gallo never remarried. She lived with Mickey's sister, Callie, until she married a policeman 10 years ago. Mickey hated him and all police with good reason. His wife's latest affair happened to be with a local cop, which drove him to the breaking point where he now stood. Now, in just a few hours, the score would be settled once and for all. Though Mickey and his sister Callie had drifted apart through the years, he always remained close with his mother. Pat was a sweet, silver-haired, saintly woman who never totally got over her husband's death. Mickey visited often and helped out whenever he was needed. On this day, however, he returned to visit not his mother, but a gun collection bequeathed to him after his grandfather Fred's death. One that until now he had no interest in. Pat greeted him with a great big birthday mother and explained he needed to borrow some tools from the basement. In far corner of the basement, he found the collection. After shuffling through various rifles, shotguns, and sidearms, he found what he was looking for. A .22 caliber pistol he and his father used for target practice once during a visit to Grandpa Fred's farm. The gun was not loaded, but there was a full box of .22 caliber bullets in the chest. He remembered what a sharp shooter his granddad was. He was adept at picking off squirrels and other varmints that tried to invade his garden. Surely this was to be his critter exterminator, he thought, as he tucked the pistol into his waistband and pulled his shirt over the top. After grabbing a handful of ammunition, he headed back upstairs to the kitchen, where Pat was still on the phone with Callie. Mickey, now overwhelmed with melancholy, wanted to hug and kiss Pat to thank her for being such a great mom. But that might trigger a presage via mother's intuition, thus alerting her that something was amiss. So he flashed a smile and motioned that he had to be going. She pleaded for him to stay so she could feed him a hearty birthday meal. But Mickey insisted he had some important business to take care of. She relented and wished him a happy birthday again. He kissed her on the cheek and left. He thought perhaps he would leave her a letter, but probably not. Now it was off to the King Comfort Motel to wait. He figured the climax of this adventure would somehow conclude around 10 o'clock p.m.